Well, hell's bells and Tiki's biologically ambiguous mammary glands. It seems like there's a new Fire Emblem game coming. It only took them a year to give us, well, more than the fact that it exists. But anyway, I think that as a huge Fire Emblem fan, there is no better use for your precious time than to go over this trailer with a fine-tooth comb, trying to find even the slightest nugget of probably wrong information that will also probably be cut out when they actually bring out the full game. But never mind, let's dig right into it. We start with a panning shot of what is apparently a brand new map, and it's worth pausing here to say that yes, this is indeed a map, not that kind of weird Google Maps thing that Fates had. So already they are taking and improving what was in the previous games and actually reverting it to what it was in the games before those, which was massively superior. So yes, A+ job there, Intelligent Systems, I approve. Moving swiftly on and ignoring the strange narration for the moment, we're given a look at 3 kingdoms. Yes, that's right, 3 kingdoms. That's up on the 2 from last game. Still apparently not good enough at writing stories to give us the full 8 or 9 kingdoms that have been in previous games. Actually, no, 8, that's not true. There haven't been 9, have there? There's been anywhere between 5 and 8 usually. But, 3's not bad. It's not brilliant in terms of building a world in some cases, but it's better than 2, the 2 that we got in Fates, which is an improvement again. And yes, they are called Fergus, okay, Azratia, and Leicester. Yes, that is in fact the kingdom of Leicester. Okay. Right, for those of you who aren't British, let's dial it back a bit. Leicester is a town, or city rather, in England, and it's where I get my cheese from. They are, well, not particularly notable for anything. Although they did win the Premier League and the Rugby Premier League, I believe, few years back, which was quite an amazing sporting achievement, really, but haven't really had that much to say for them recently. But yeah, gotta say that's a really strange choice of name. I sort of thought that Fire Emblem had moved on sort of a bit from just taking names of random foreign places that happen to still exist, things like having to change Macedon to Medan and having to change Orleans to Aurelis, and of course Leinster and Ulster and Munster and all the rest of them, which still are, of course, places in Ireland. But yeah, Leicester apparently, and if you look closely you can also see Gloucester. Right. Another place where I get cheese from, and Edmund, right up in the top corner, and Milthin. Yeah, Milthin, I'm pretty sure most of you will be aware, is, I think, a corruption of Myrthin, which is the name of the character that would eventually become Merlin after the writer Geoffrey of Monmouth decided that having someone called Merdin would be a little bit ridiculous to those of a French-speaking persuasion, if you know the French word for shit. But that's an aside. It looks like we know something already about these 3 countries. We can immediately say for ourselves that, yes, we have the country of Leicester. Yeah, the country of Leicester appears to have, if these names are consistent, a naming scheme based on English and Welsh places, names, so on, and that sort of thing. It looks like probably the smallest one. Look, going up to the top, you've got the country of Fergus, which again is a fairly nondescript Irish name. It looks like, you've got things like Brianac there. You've also got Tethian. Also, weirdly, you've got Tutatis as well next to that cave. That's a Gaulish name. Which is kind of weird. There's also, right at the top, you've got Mount Guinevere, I think that says, which is, it looks like it's kind of Irish, kind of ancient Gaulish. There's also, Gaspard in the middle, and Charon, that's Greek as well. So, yeah, this one looks like it's mainly supposed to be Irish, but is kind of all over the place as far as theme naming is concerned. I imagine it's supposed to be kind of Irish in the same way that Jugdril was kind of half Irish, half Norse in terms of its mythology, with a bit of English snuck in for good measure. Arthur and Beowulf, of course, are English, where it doesn't really make sense because nobody else in that entire continent were. And then we come to Azratia. I've got to admit, I've no idea what Azratia is. It looks like their kingdom sort of spans a little bit past the mountain range. Fergus and Leicester look like they're split by the mountain range, but Azratia, I think, extends past the coast. I think Nubello is probably part of Azratia as well. I'm not really sure what they're meant to be based on. You've got Rusalka at the bottom, that's a Russian name, I believe, and Dali at the top. I don't want to say because I'll get it wrong. And then Amid and Decilius almost. It almost seems like they're kind of Roman, kind of Spanish sort of area, vaguely European. And then in the middle we've got this weird Targmak or Bargmak. I'm not entirely sure if that's supposed to be the name of a mountain. It might be, but yeah, that one's really confusing. I'm not sure what to make of that. But anyway, moving swiftly on, we also have to look at their shields. Now, this is kind of an odd one. I'm not a whiz at heraldry. Leicester's weird because it has the crescent moon that's usually associated with caliphates and other sort of Muslim kingdoms, the Ottomans, that sort of thing. It's also it's a quartered shield that is sort of also mostly associated with medieval heraldry. I'm not sure what to make of them, to be honest. None of the kingdoms heralds or anything that seems to be particularly associated with the countries they're obviously taking inspiration from. For example, there seems to be a griffin on Fergus's one, and I'm not entirely sure what that has to do with Irish. And the Leicester's has crescent moon, obviously, some sort of weird vegetable thing, and some dots. So it's that seems to be just an artistic thing. It probably not going to be able to read very much into that. But anyway, the important point behind all of this is that we do have an idea of how these nations are going to be squaring up to each other. They all seem to have different cultural backgrounds and inspirations, which I suppose is going to be used to distinguish them. We don't know yet if that's going to be reflected in the classes they have, or possibly the weapons that classes specialise in different regions. Maybe the Fergus will use spears more because of Gabolg and so on, and Brianac, and maybe Leicester will use swords like Excalibur and Clarent. But that's an aside. We don't know enough to say any more about it at this point. You can see in pretty much the next shot, there's a quick glimpse of two warriors who are fighting with each other. One is like an armoured knight, and the other one is some sort of Viking-inspired barbarian-looking fellow. They're both clearly on opposite sides, but more importantly than that, it looks like they're from different countries and different cultural inspirations. I imagine that the knight is from either the weird European conglomerate Azrathia or whatever it was called, and that the other one is from either Fergus or Leicester. Yeah, but honestly, all of them all of the cultural inspirations have had both knight and barbarian sort of periods in their history. So it could be anything really. We'll see where that goes. We also see that the Viking faction appears to be allied against whoever this dragon woman is, while the knights seem to be protecting her. That looks like it's important. It looks like the knights are going to be the ones protecting whoever this green-haired dragon-type woman is supposed to be. More on that later. Let's briefly go back to the opening crawl over the map again. Must say again, I'm so glad that they've brought maps back. We have a woman's voice talking about some goddess-like figure. Immediately you get the idea that this is going to be some sort of background universe set up rather like Tellius, where you have this universally acknowledged goddess who happens to be worshipped by everyone, and that there are some other kind of differences that are splitting people up. For example, everyone being racist, or no one can quite agree on how best to worship said goddess, or something like that. But yes, apparently she's given her some sort of divine revelation to a prophet of some description, and apparently she's the mother of all life, despite life having existed before she gave this divine revelation, which doesn't really make that much sense, but then I suppose most organised religions don't, so let's leave that there. To be honest, I get the distinct impression we're going to have to kill this goddess at some point, or pull one of those bullshit things like Radiant Dawn did, where we kill her but we don't kill her because, I don't know, we're the good guys and we can't kill people even when we stab them, so, you know, your mileage may vary. So, let's talk about this mural in a bit more detail. So we can see that we have this chap who I suppose is probably the prophet, who's wielding some sort of flamberge sword, a flamberge sword with a curved edge usually used to deflect other swords when dueling. We have the poor unwashed masses at the bottom. There's a big white dragon and some other sorts of dragons. I'm not sure if that means that we'll get the different dragon tribes coming back. It would be great if we did, but I strongly suspect not. And right at the top, we have some sort of fourth kingdom. Apparently it is ruled by the goddess, and it's up above, so conveniently out of place until the plot demands it turn up. So yeah, hopefully that won't be a third DLC path, or even a fourth one, or fifth one, depending on how many countries there actually are on the map. Having a better look at this blonde or greeny blonde-haired lady, you can see she has on her head quite a few interesting ornaments. She has red braids reminiscent of the Manichees from Awakening, but also this white flower with a purple interior. I can't quite tell what sort of flower that is. It would be great if I could. I had an idea that it might be an Edelweiss, but I don't think that has purple interior. She also has dragon wing sort of accessories, and it looks as though, even if she's not a dragon herself, she's some sort of priest or someone nominally allied to a dragon faction, which, in theory, given the way the mural is presented, is connected to the goddess. Maybe the goddess is a dragon, maybe the goddess uses dragons as her angel proxies or something like that, but we will see later. There's not really anything else to go on as far as this is concerned. It would be great if we could tell what kind of flower that was, if anyone in the comments knows what kind of flower that is, so that we can derive greater meaning from the design. But as far as we know for now, she's just a woman with some sort of plot importance in some respect. And that was the first 30 seconds of footage, and it is definitely a Fire Emblem game. Huge sighs of relief from the peanut gallery. But there's more. We get a look at actual gameplay, and oh my, it does look rather good, if I may be cautiously optimistic. We start off with a UI that's very reminiscent of the Tellius games. I was never a fan of the Tellius games, I won't lie, but one thing that they did absolutely right is they got their UI spot on. We're introduced to a character who is called Edelgard. Now, when I first heard this name, my immediate thought was, again, Edelweiss. That maybe that flower is relevant in some respect, but I don't think that's it. Edel is a fairly common sort of Anglo-Germanic naming convention. Things like Edel, Edelgard, Edel, etc., Edelward, etc. So Edelgard is essentially just means noble protector. It's fairly non-indicative as aristocrat names goes, and indeed she is an aristocrat, a new class which apparently uses swords and axes, unless it's like the Game Boy Lords, which were all had the same name but had different properties. That might be the case as well. On to more important matters, we can see that in this single map there is more terrain than there was in the entirety of Path of Radiance. Of course, I will not be... I won't lie to you, I'm not sure if they'll be bringing back things like forts. One of the big problems I had with Path of Radiance, and indeed Radiant Dawn, was that they had very little alternative cover because of the limitations of making Fire Emblem in a 3D engine. It's not really possible to generate forts like that, but in this case it looks relatively similar. You can see that we've got grassland rather than plains tiles, as well as forest tiles, and hopefully those will be working the same way they always have. If they don't, we're in trouble. We can also see that there are other units on the field. There's one with a spear, one with a sword, one with a bow, and one with a funny hat. Yep. And on the opposing team, looks like there's only 3 enemies, and yep, we can see that there appear to be what look like range markers on the field. And as well, there seems to be... I think at the bottom it looks like there are health gauges, which appear to be showing how much health each of the units has at the time, so none of them seem to be damaged yet. And here's something fun. It looks like if you walk diagonally, the character will actually travel in a straight path straight to the target destination, rather than taking a zigzag route as they did in previous games. That's a nice touch, I like that. Moving on, we have a quite nice but also quite busy interface. We get to see that there's a lot of different options that one can take in this situation. You can attack, that's normal. Magic is odd. We've only seen that she's equipped axes and swords. Does this mean that tomes are out of the game? I do hope not. Those are a very distinctive Fire Emblem trait, but we shall see. We've also got combat arts. Those seem to be making a return from Echoes. Formations, we'll be obviously learning more about those as they come. Equip, items, and weight are all the same. Doesn't seem like they're doing any Thracia 776 nonsense of rearranging the order of options in the menu, so we can all rest easy, I think. Moving very swiftly on, we can see that Edelgard has swords and axes, and importantly we can see that weapon durability has returned, although it looks like steel axes and steel weapons in general have gotten a buff when it comes to the number of or the amount of durability they've got. And battle data is also quite interesting. We can see that we've got attack, hit, crit as usual, and but interestingly we've got hit and avoid rather than just the straight up accuracy or chance to hit. We've also got, I'm not sure if because an avoid stat of 0 is kind of curious. Usually if you have at least 1 speed you'd have some sort of avoidance or 1 point in luck. Critical is 5, that seems straightforward. But attack speed AS is another interesting one, because usually in most recent games there basically is no such thing as attack speed, because attack speed is equivalent to speed stat. The only time it's been relevant is when things like weapon weight have been introduced to the game. So this gives me the idea that if there's a modulated attack speed stat, that means that stats like weapon weight and constitution could well be making their way back into the game. That's I'm not sure how to feel about that, But you know, if you're a fan of little Pegasus Knights and girl mages, then unfortunately looks like this may not be the game for you. But keep your ears to the ground. But that's not all. We also have two new stats which appear to be End and Ruzzle. I can't for the life of me think what those two stats mean, though given the 6 and the 7, this looks like they go up to hundreds, given the grayed out letters, so that suggests to me that there's some sort of function of existing stats rather than new stats in and of themselves, and as to what they refer to, I'm not really sure. It could simply be that endurance is a new name for like battle window defense. If like you've got your defense stat and then endurance is the modulated defense after things like supports or formations, and Ruzzle could be resistance or modified resistance, or it could be that both of these stats have something to do with the new formations system, and we just don't know enough yet to talk about it. In other news, we've got Edelgard at level 3 has got 29 hit points, which is, you know, it's not huge, but it's certainly not Lynn or Eliwood tier. She's quite beefy. So that gives us an idea that she's going to be a more front lines tanky unit than a straight up player phase nuke. That's about all we can get out of this, I'm afraid. Also, apparently we're an instructor. Well, I'll just take that as it comes, really. Now, Edelgard moves into attack. This looks like a fairly straightforward battle forecast. It does actually show how their HP will decrease as the battle progresses, which is quite interesting. Edelgard, again, is getting doubled by who is presumably a fast sword-wielding unit, Mercedes, or Mercedes, might be a Count of Monte Cristo reference. And we can also see that Edelgard actually has decent hit despite the weapon triangle disadvantage, and also that she's probably decently tanky as well. I'm not depending on if growth rates notwithstanding, obviously, but we shall see what happens. Weirdly, in the top left, the what looks like the back button also looks like the image for skills like Vantage in earlier games. I'm not sure if that means anything or if that's just an artistic choice. And oh my god, look at this battle! Look at it! Okay, so before we get swept up in things, we can see that Edelgard is attacking with a group of what appear to be other axe fighters. It looks like the fighters that are in your squad all have the same weapon. That seems fairly standard. And Mercedes, from the looks of things, has a sort of priestess robe with gown type deal going on. Not the traditional garb of the female swords master, indeed. So there might be some sort of like popish faction related to some sort of a centralized religious force. Maybe Mercedes is a part of that, and yeah, I'm forced to recall from, I think, the original Fire Emblem Fates trailer where they had a lot of units in the backgrounds of those, and we were thinking, you know, this is going to be how it is in this game. We're going to have, in all of these battles, we're going to have a lot of background units just for cosmetic reasons. In this game, here they appear to be cosmetic, at least in this instance. There's instances later on where you appear to be controlling large squads as squads, but it's kind of unclear at the moment whether there are certain battles where they are just cosmetic, and indeed whether or not this is the norm, or if there will be battles where they simply don't where you're just controlling individual people, that's a possibility, because, as I say, for Fates, we were expecting them to have these cosmetic background characters, and they were just in one chapter, which wasn't part of any of the games proper, so there you go. We've also been introduced to Dimitri, who is some sort of blondie guy with blue cloak and a blue scabbarded sword thing, so he looks like he's a sword and lance unit, and he's going up against a kingdom soldier. It's not entirely clear if that means he is affiliated with a faction other than the kingdom, or if this is a training exercise and he's just stabbing this soldier for the heck of it. But we shall see. It does appear, though, as though this kingdom soldier is part of the knight faction. That seems to be a thing. So yes, we do know that it's not just for show. There are fully armor-clad generics as part of the soldiers you'll be fighting. They're not just in the cutscenes. I get the impression that Dimitri might be part of the weird European cluster, the Third Nation. Not for any reason other than that Dimitri is a kind of Russian Eastern European name, and that seems to gel with the whole naming thing that they've got going on there. Next up, we have Cloud, who is apparently an archer with slightly shaky accuracy, maybe. But yeah, he also seems to be attacking the kingdom soldiers. Nothing really to say here. There's some destroyed castle ruins. I'm not sure if anyone's told the Japanese that the castles were in fact at one point still standing. We didn't build the ruins just like that, but you know, we'll see how that fits into the story. And now, time for a cutscene with slightly wonky frame rate. I'm not particularly bothered by that, but you can see we've got Pegasus Knights, we've got mounted units, and because we haven't actually seen any of those yet, that was a slight worry that they might not be in this game. But yes, we can confirm that there are mounted and flying units, and obviously armoured units, and these are knights, and they're charging towards what look, they've got barbarian uniforms, but they're wearing kilts. Now that is interesting. I don't know if they're going to be part of the sort of Anglo-Germanic Leicester type Leicester kingdom, or if they're going to be part of the sort of proto-Celtic Fergus kingdom. I'd wager they might be part of the Fergus kingdom, but you can see they're wearing they've got swords and axes, and they look very barbarian-esque. They're yeah. Moving on, we get a quite exciting look at something that appears to be how you can view the map in different ways. You can zoom in to get a better look at the actual goings on, which brings up a mini map as well as allowing you to see all of your squad soldiers around you. You can also see that it does look like, at the very least, in terms of magic, there are tome-specific units. Looking at the mini map, there is a tome right there, as well as bows, spears, swords, the works. So what that means for why Edelgard can cast magic, I'm not sure. It might just be a placeholder option in the menu, but well, it might be that there's also a split between combat magic that involves tomes and some sort of buff magic that might have been introduced. There's not an awful lot else to say in this scene. I'm not entirely sure how it's going to work when the soldiers from different squads overlap, if they're going to interact with each other in any way, or if it'll just look like a confusing mess, or if soldiers from different opposing armies will just intermingle with each other until they're told to attack. That might also be a possibility. We can only live in hope. As the cursor moves, those red lines that we saw earlier go slightly berserk, jumping all over the place, and it's not entirely clear, to me at least, what those are supposed to represent, because there are a few cases where the red lines are jumping between enemy enemy groups. So I'm not sure if that means that they're supporting, or possibly that there's an effect of formations going on. I think it's almost certainly there's formations. I don't think it's got anything to do with the range of units involved, although that again might have something to do with it. I can't rule it out. But yeah, we also get to see there's a pink-haired girl, some sort of old man with a moustache, grey-haired boy, blue-haired boy. So at least we are getting the cartoonish hair colours. That's something I really, really very greatly prize in Fire Emblem, in terms of actually having colourful characters with colourful artwork, not the sort of washed-out colours that we've seen in quite a lot of pretty much all of the 3DS Fire Emblems. Very, very empty-faced and dour-looking, quite washed-out colours, that sort of thing, the sort of Final Fantasy treatment, if you will. In this shot, we also get a glimpse of what our character's name is, Mr. sort of blacky, blue-haired chap who's wielding a sword. His name is Byleth, and and again, there is an icon at the top which looks like Wrath. Now, I said before that the one previously looked like Vantage, so it could be now, don't quote me on this, but it could be that these are indicating skills that could activate in battle. So it looks like, what's-her-face, Edelgard has Vantage or a similar skill. That could be the case. And if that is true, then that means that our avatar has a skill equivalent to Vantage, or not Vantage, Wrath, sorry. And, yeah, another thing that's worth noting is that his name is Byleth, as in Beleth, as in the Demon King, Byleth. And, yeah, looks a lot like our quote-unquote MC, my unit protagonist, Kun, whatever you want to call him, is going to be another Demon King opposing a goddess sort of deal. That looks like that's what's going on. Oh dear. Oh yeah, and they start talking about crests. No, shut up, I know what you're thinking. That was not a Fire Emblem anime. No. And no, they're not stealing ideas from terrible animation anime things either. No. Stop it, we're not talking about this anymore. Okay, fine. Look, it looks like the crests are going to be some sort of plot coupon in this story. It looks like maybe there are crests that give you magic powers, crests that give you maybe authority to be an aristocrat or something like that. They're either marks of power or they are legit magical devices. And tokens of the goddess's power indicates that you can use them for something in combat. But, I don't like the idea of, because that was a terrible anime. Just saying. Also, the crests are to blame. So, if Edgelord says so, Edelgard, then, that's, that must be true, mustn't it? Oh, we also get an interesting view of some forests. I can't quite remember off the top of my head what kind of forest they are. I want to say pine forest, but then I'm not too keen on that. Very medieval style architecture in the background. I like that. I've always loved the fact that Fire Emblem's been so quite dedicated to that kind of medieval aesthetic, because I do love that. I'm not too keen on games that sort of flip-flop between different kinds of architecture, even though it is sometimes necessary for change, but, just quite keen on it. Notice very quickly that the emblem on the banner doesn't seem to correspond to any of the crests that we saw in the beginning. And that's interesting, but, we were moving on, yes. This is protagonist Kun. He's very protagonistic. He's got his I'm not entirely sure how his jacket's even staying on, but he's got black armor and a blue dagger for some reason. And it's at least he's wearing armor. Let's put it that way. I'm not sure if he's a modifiable my unit or not. He might just be a sort of flat protagonist a la Persona. And speaking of Persona, let's talk about this game's art style. Yeah, it does look a lot like those sort of 3D anime-esque video games of the recent past. Things like Persona, things like Trails of Cold Steel, and indeed this whole setup, this sort of castle, is very sort of Trails of Cold Steel-y in the sense that you're in a castle, you're in an academy even, and you're an instructor taking on the role of instructing these royals and other soldiers and things like that. It's I'm not sure how to really judge it yet. If I'm okay, there is one thing that I do want to bring up though, and that's that back in Fire Emblem Fates, one of the big problems with the My Castle system was the fact that it was static. And that meant that if you wanted to return there, they had to come up with that bullshit, we warp there after our story missions, and then we just warp back straight away once we're ready to go on to the next mission as if nothing happened. So the thing is, this castle isn't going to move around, and so that means that we might have something similar where we're warping back to this castle after every story mission, and that's going to be really, really detrimental to the story if that's the case. I do hope that they've got some sort of story check for that, because otherwise that's going to really annoy me, especially if there's something like the sort of hammer space explanation that was there in Fates. I do hope that's not the case, or that this academy that you can explore is only available at certain times when the story demands, and there isn't an expectation that you'll spend ages prattling about in between story missions that are supposed to be taking place basically immediately after the other. That's just a gripe I've got. I've got it out of my system now. Let's hope that it doesn't turn out that way. We get a better look at the castle and a better look at Edelgard, who is very, very, very attractive. And yes, I've seen all the fan fiction, fan art, that's been posted in the last 24 hours. That was very, very fast. But yes, the important thing is, firstly, this society has progressed to the point where we have both blackboards and notice boards and ink quills and so forth. But also, We've got, what's the word, some sort of time-gated progression system wherein Edelgard is either able to improve her axe skills or sword skills, and that's interesting because that suggests that there are going to be more time-gated events in this game. Things maybe like supports might be time-gated, might be related to when you spend your free time in the castle rather than how much time you bond on the battlefield. I'm not sure how much I'd like that change or changes of that nature if there were more things that you had to do with limited time while free roaming, but, you know, I can't say anything definite right now. That this is only where the next logical step is given what they've shown us so far. And also, I don't like how Edelgard has the kind of Final Fantasy Type 0 cape look about her. I just noticed that, but that is, I can't really unsee it. That's really unsettling. And yeah, hopefully that doesn't say anything about where the inspiration for her character came from. Hopefully, we shall see. Now we see the same girl as at the beginning. She's cuddling some sort of sword. You can tell it's the same girl from the flowers and the dragon hairpiece that she's got on. She's cuddling some sort of demonic-looking sword. I get the feeling that might be related to the Avatar in some way, based on his name, and she's cuddling it rather. I do hope that she isn't going to be pulling one of those release the Demon King from the ceiling sword kind of deals, the sort of Idun story, but yeah, that might be related to the My unit because of the Byleth name and because of the kind of demonic imagery he has on his armor. It's possible that he's going to be connected to them like that, which would be a shame because quite a lot of the My Unit stories have been quite similar to that thus far, but we shall see. Next up, we go back to Dimitri, and it looks like we're seeing some some sort of visual guide to how things like formations and combat arts will work. It looks like there are certain combat arts that can only be done in particular formations. So this triangle formation, I assume, is going to be something like increasing attack at the cost of defense or something like that. And then you can use a combat art that allows you to charge through an enemy group. Do decent damage. We're also getting our first look at how mages in this game look, and looks like they're casting from some sort of staff thing rather than from a tome. Not sure exactly if that means that that's what tomes look like, or if that's just this character class or weapon type or something like that. But it also looks like there are different animations for the background characters and the main officer characters as well, which is quite interesting. Moving swiftly on, oh look, it's the generic bearded antagonist. At least I assume so. It's kind of hard to tell from here, but we can see he's got grey hair, he's scarred, he's got a furry neckerchief, and one of those bone string swords. Yeah, he seems like he's going to probably be on the barbarian faction, whichever that one is, and probably opposed to whatever the main religion denomination is doing somehow. Maybe the case that he's not such a bad guy after all. That looks like it could be the case, but yeah, he looks like he's going to be a major character. And given that they didn't show us controlling him, it looks like he might be an antagonist. You might say we've had a lot of these sort of old emperor type characters in recent Fire Emblem games, and yes, we have. We've had Walhart, we've had Garen, and then finally we had Rudolph coming back in, although Rudolph wasn't supposed to be that old. They just designed him that way in Echoes because Walhart, so I don't really count that as two different points. I don't know if this is going to become a trend for Fire Emblem. I hope it doesn't, but he looks like a visually interesting character, and certainly I'm interested to see if there's more to him than there was for those three characters, because those three were very, very much a case of wasted potential in the extreme. I'm also interested to see if this whip sword has any special properties to it, and indeed if the flamberge we saw in the opening is playable and has any special properties, if it has like Swordbreaker in the weapon or a similar skill like that. That would be cool, actually, to have more weapons with inbuilt skills and things like that. Oh, there's also a dark magic sort of wave, or maybe he's flailing his stick so hard it's kicking up dirt, I'm not really sure, but one of the two. Oh yeah, and we also have a sort of golem which Cloud is attacking for reasons best known to himself. I'm not sure what the architecture represents. There's a lot of Greek-style columns, which would indicate that this is in a different area to the sort of medieval castle-inspired area. I'm not sure if this automaton is going to be like an important theme, if there's a faction that uses automatons a lot, or if the villains use automatons, or maybe it's just like what we got in the Fates trailer again, and it's like the Stoneborn, where they have this giant stone-faced golem climbing up the side of a castle, and we're all going, oh my god, what is it? What does it mean? How does it work? And then it just turns out it's like this rubbery plasticine monster that turns up in a couple of maps with no explanation and just magic. But yeah, I'm not going to put any undue importance into the random appearance of automatons until the game tells me they're important. I'm going to concentrate more on the dragons and the wizards, if you don't mind me saying so. And of course we get these special cut-ins. Now this is interesting because there isn't any James Bond one-liner in this case. Byleth just glares angrily and then shanks a guy. But does this mean that skill activation quotes have been removed? Because I'd like that. Or does it mean that Byleth just is a kind of silent-ish character, and that's doesn't have a voice? I'm not sure why they would take that sort of step back after Chris, Robin, and Corin were all sort of immensely annoying, but also very talkative and had personalities of their own. That would be a weird step back. But yeah, it does show that this guy is going to be a playable character. We knew that already, but also that he's going to have his own critical animation skill cut in things, and we can't really say that much more about them. Yeah. And finally, the most mysterious part of the trailer. A stone throne with an unknown emblem on it, with a sleeping child. A sleeping child, moreover, with elf ears, meaning that this is definitely a Manakete. Alright, yeah, I know, everyone knew that, but just bear with me for a second. This means that yes, Manaketes are back in the game, and yes, they are part of the storyline. And just as long as there aren't any beast units, I'll be happy. But yeah, the Manaketes are an integral part of Fire Emblem as a series, and I'm glad that they haven't got rid of them. And I'm guessing that hopefully it's not going to be an Ashura Dearly where if this child wakes up the world ends or something like that, because that's just stupid. But hopefully there's going to be some sort of plot point revolving around waking this child up and what happens when it does, and what her significance is to the greater political goings on, whether she has a connection to the goddess or who this goddess even is. I don't know where this goddess came from or what she's doing, or even if this world is connected to any other ones, but who's to say? Who is to say? Oh, and of course we can't forget that apparently Edelgard and Byleth are going to be split up at some point, apparently, because Byleth is saying to him, "Don't forget me." Or I assume she's talking to Byleth because she's addressing the player or the person watching the trailer. But yeah, hopefully they're going to meet up again, or maybe she goes off to war and he stays at the academy and then he has to chase after her or something like that. I'm curious. I'm honestly curious. I'm curious as to Byleth's whole role in this as well, whether or not he might not be in some way connected as well to the goings on with the goddess and the dragons, given his sort of demonic imagery. So yeah, there's a lot to think about in this. There is a lot to think about.